Bedazzled 2000 was the only movie we were going to do this week. The comedy starring Brendan Fraser and Elizabeth Hurley, directed by none other than Harold Ramis.
Egon himself,
director of Groundhog Day and Stripes.
Year One.
Yep. And Year One.
Also Year One.
Greetings, loyal listeners and new recruits. I'm Drew Deach.
I'm Travis Newton.
And this is GenreVision.
GenreVision is a weekly movie club where we discuss horror films, action movies, fantasy flicks, sci-fi cinema, and more.
And we are concluding Satan Timber with what ended up being an unexpected double feature of Bedazzled and Bedazzled. But before we talk about Bedazzled, let's talk about Bedazzled.
The remake.
This was one that we were like, hey, it's another comedy like we did with P.D. Wheatstraw. It gives us a woman playing the devil, which was cool. It was a movie that I saw when it came out on video, and in the intervening years, I remember vague things about it, and was always like, I wonder why nobody brings that up. It's probably because it's just not very good.
Well, the critical response to it at the time was pretty lukewarm. I think it stands at a 50% on Rotten Tomatoes right now, to give you sort of an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so, 50%, honestly, for the kind of movies you and I do, 50% is a promising number.
It's true.
That it could go anyways. Like, well, this could end up being underrated or actually fairly decent, and people were totally off base, and it's aged well. Like, those sorts of things happen. I don't know. I feel like pretty frequently with the movies we feature here on the show.
Frequently enough. Well,
yeah.
We're always looking for the shiniest parts. We want to see the good in movies.
You and I are like Carla Gugino in Watchmen at this point. Those bright spots just keep shining brighter, baby.
Even the grimy ones.
But like right now in the middle of the Brendan Fraser renaissance, it was tempting to like go back and see like, okay, like at the height of this man's power, like what was going on with this movie. I mean, it features Elizabeth Hurley as the devil, which is fantastic casting.
Sure, and for what she's given and what she's asked to do, hail Satan. She rocks.
Yeah.
She's Elizabeth Hurley. Like, of course she's going to rock.
I mean, she had just come off like this big, I feel like, star-making turn from Austin Powers.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was easily the first thing I ever saw her in.
Sure. And so seeing her in this, I mean, it's a great riff. Like, it's the best movie. It's the best idea this movie had, frankly.
Yes.
To put Elizabeth Hurley in as the devil character. While it's a really simple riff on the devil character, it's more akin to something. It really is more akin to like the folktale devil that we see in the devil in Daniel Webster, where it's like the devil really has a singular purpose and will show up to continue to fuck with people. And in such, it's a really simple kind of elemental interpretation that finds the fun in the character. And a big part of the fun with the interpretation of this devil is like costume changes. That in some sense carries over from the original, but they're having much more conscious fun with it here with Hurley.
Well, yeah, I mean, because Hurley's costume will change in the same scene between cuts at times.
Yeah,
like it's that rapid, and it's great. It's a wonderful wardrobe. She looks great. She plays it great. Just for anybody who doesn't know, the basic premise between both versions of Bedazzled is that some schlubby guy,
sad sack.
Sad sack's better than schlubby, ends up running into the devil, or the devil picks them out, I should say, and offers them 7 wishes for their soul. And this sad sack has an incredible, probably unhealthy infatuation with some woman that he works with.
Yep.
That's in the 2000s version, that's Brendan Fraser. He works at Office Space Company. Like, who cares?
It's some bland, office space type corporation in San Francisco.
Cubicle hell.
Yeah, and he's just like ultra dweeb, like super annoying, socially inept. And it's kind of against type for Brendan Fraser, who of course was a f*** machine.
I mean, he was hunky, he was charming, and this was definitely playing up against that, where when he's introduced, I don't know, because like this era of comedy, like this post Something About Mary, American Pie era of like the late 90s into the 2000s comedies, I don't know with these things in terms of intent. Our read on it was like, Brendan Fraser's character sucks. Like, he's awful. He's a terrible, terrible guy. But the movie, I think, just thinks like, oh, he's just a weirdo nerd that nobody understands and everybody's mean to him. And that aspect of it has aged like milk. Like, he's awful.
Well, I mean, I gained a little bit of perspective after seeing the other one where, you know, the sort of morality, like in the nature of the protagonist is questioned a lot more heavily. Like, is he really a good guy? I don't know. Like there's a reason like he gets along so well with the devil in that original 1967 movie, which we'll get to later. But here they definitely make a stronger and much simpler argument for him as a sympathetic character in Act 1. You know, there's a scene where he goes to a bar and his coworkers have not invited him, but he sees them there anyway, having fun. And there's just a brief moment with him, like really looking like a sad sack. You know, the score rises and we're meant to think like, oh, he's not a bad guy. He's just socially inept. Poor him.
Sure.
I get it. You know, that makes sense on the surface level. Like, again, this movie is so simple. It is so devoid of nuance in character interactions. It's super broad. Which I mean, it was a PG-13 comedy in the 2000s. I mean, of course it was going to be broad.
As a carryover from the original, which we'll get into, but I do think this context is important, is that the original was essentially a sketch movie born of sketch artists who had a sketch show.
Mm-hmm.
So in the remake, that's there, but it doesn't feel like it understands how that dynamic needs to work, because it doesn't work as a sketch movie, and it really doesn't work as a through line for our main character in terms of learning any kind of lesson with each wish, or the situations are also, this is the other thing too, is that the wishes end up being so awful in terms of what they end up doing. And it seems to be a chance to make up Brendan Fraser in a bunch of different ways. Including one that's straight up racist. And when we were watching it, I was like, oh, this is why nobody talks about this movie anymore, is because Brendan Fraser did brownface.
He did indeed. He's got a big prosthetic nose on and a spray on tan. And yeah, it's so broad, and by today's standards, really hacky. It's just hacky. And I hate using that adjective, but there's so many tired jokes in this. Like, we talked about Junior, and it's sort of really bad stand-up comedians, you know, riffing on, you know, like War of the Sexes, you know, Men Are From Mars kind of bullshit. Mm-hmm. And this traffics in a lot of those same stereotypes of like, what do women actually want? Do they want the sensitive man? What is the ultimate parody of the sensitive man that we could do? And I think there is potential in that take of like, how can we best explore all of these different tropes about how men particularly see women and approach women for romantic relationships. There's potential there for that kind of take.
It is, but in the remake, it is much more about the presentation of a man and how he believes he should present himself to get the dream girl, as she is known. Because a great example in this one, which I thought would have been in the original, but this one's actually more backwards. The 2000s one's more regressive than the 1967 version.
Oh yeah.
Is that there's a big thing where he's like, you know, I want to be handsome and articulate, and I want her to be totally in love with me and all this blah, blah, blah. And the trick of all this is like, the devil will grant a wish, but there will be some rub in it that, you know, ruins it. And he doesn't get the wish of falling in love with the girl. So in this one, he's an author. He's super popular. He's hunky Brendan Fraser. He's incredibly articulate. He's hosting this big dinner party. And the woman played by Frances O'Connor is just head over heels in love with him. And it turns out, wah, wah, he's gay. And it's awful. Like,
yeah.
It's so awful.
Well, here's what really chafes my nuts with this movie, right? This should be better than it is. It doesn't have to be great. But like, I was not expecting this movie to be this bad.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the movies that we have done this year for the show, Travis and I have actually been ranking some of the movies that we've been doing individually. I mean, this is worse than the Never-Ending Story 2 in my book. It's down there with like close to Harry and the Hendersons. This was bad.
The stunning silence that you and I had watching this movie. I mean, it's not even bad enough to like laugh at. Like, it's just falling on its face where you're like, I feel like I'm wasting my time with this. And it sucks to say that because, you know, with the pieces assembled as they are on paper, it's like, well, there's got to be something here. Fuck, Toby Huss is in it. It can't be all bad.
Yeah, I mean, Toby Huss shows up
in a bunch of different roles too. He puts a bunch of silly different makeups on.
Sure. I mean, it. What's even more incredible to me is that this movie isn't awful. Like if it crossed over into being so awful that it was like junior levels, it would be almost kind of remarkable.
It would be like watching, like a really spectacular explosion or something. Like, oh my God, take a look at this nuclear piece of trash. But no, this is the disappointing kind of bad. Where you're like, wow, that's like crushingly bad. Like Ramis, from a directorial standpoint, does nothing interesting.
Or I mean, he's got a screenplay credit.
Yeah, these jokes are so recycled and so bad. Even for then. I mean, woof. The only iteration of the Fraser character I liked is the one where he plays like a 7-foot tall basketball player, like a really stupid, just like brick stupid basketball player.
Mm-hmm.
There's some funny stuff there, I thought, when he gives the interview and he's they put this wig on him that sweats, so he's just pouring buckets and buckets of sweat from his scalp, and I'm like, that's a funny gag.
That's about it.
That's really about it. They put some funny teeth in him.
The laughs are few and far between. The twists on the wishes aren't like that whole deal where he was a big stupid basketball player and he's talking to Frances O'Connor and she's like so clearly into him and he doesn't realize it. I was like, oh, that's going to be the trick. He's too stupid. Like that's what it's like. Yeah, you'll be athletic and, attractive and everything, but you'll be way too dumb and she'll hate that you're dumb. And it's like, oh, okay, fine. Like, that makes sense. No, it's that he has a tiny penis.
Right. And they can't even say that. They skirt around it like, I don't know, talking about for 2 minutes using euphemisms. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, who's this for?
Yeah, I mean, that in some ways, because it was part of that era, that post Something About Mary, American Pie thing, it feels like a raunch comedy that had all of the edge sanded off of it.
Right.
But it's like the vapor of it is still hovering around.
Its gay jokes aren't even funny. Fuck.
No, I mean, it's gay jokes aren't funny. Its racist jokes aren't funny. Like, even the bad stuff isn't funny. It's just a big whiff. It's a big whiff of a movie. And it's an absolute, I mean, like we said earlier, but it bears repeating. When we were watching our screening, we both agreed that Elizabeth Hurley's Devil deserves a way better movie.
For sure.
Like,
yeah.
because she is good. Like, in the terms of our devils this month, she's great. Like, she's a really fun, seductive, bubbly, energetic devil. Like, her take on it is not worth watching the movie, but it's one of the few saving graces about it.
Had that role been better written and had more screen time, I think this movie could have been potentially salvageable. But as such, like, she disappears for long stretches of it. She has little cameos during the fantasy sequences, like during the wish fulfillment sequences.
While, yeah.
Like, she shows up as a cheerleader on the basketball court, for instance.
Yeah, or in the ultra sensitive guy who can't look at the sunset without breaking into tears one, where Brendan Fraser's made up to look like Danny Elfman.
I thought he looked like Ginger Zach Braff.
She shows up with two big dogs on the beach that ruin their kiss moment.
Yeah,
dogs named Dudley and Peter. Haha.
Cute. That'll come into play when we do the next one.
Yes, but yeah, like and Brendan Fraser, I love Brendan Fraser. I so am here for the renaissance that's going on with him, and I really hope it continues and leads to some really cool stuff. But this is definitely like, don't watch this. Like, for Brendan Fraser.
There is, you know what? I'll give it one thing. Movie kisses are hard to do. There is one kiss in this movie that is fantastic. Elizabeth Hurley kisses Brendan Fraser pretty early on when she meets him at that bar. Mm-hmm. I was like, damn, it's a hot kiss.
Yeah, it's Elizabeth Hurley. She can't not be hot. Like, she knows what she's doing. She's incredible.
Sure, but somebody had to shoot that kiss and light it and make it look good, and takes two to tango, more than two to tango.
Well, one of the few things I remembered from this movie was the extreme close up of her whispering in Brendan Fraser's ear, "I'm the devil."
It's a great close up.
Yeah, again, all of this belongs in a way better movie.
Well, that's the one sequence in the movie where it kind of comes alive, and then they just go to McDonald's, and I'm like, Really?
Yep. And Keanu's right next door drinking coffee with James Hong.
Yeah. Mac and me is wandering around somewhere in there.
Yeah. Woo. Yeah. So here's the deal. We were just going to do Bedazzled 2000.
But it sucked too much shit.
Yes. And the thing is, I had seen the original 1967 version one time back in the long, long ago days of Netflix mail-in DVDs.
Ooh.
So yes, like, just,
in the before.
Yeah, Kate Blanchett should be narrating that time at this point.
Yeah.
So I had very, very, very vague memories of it, but I remembered enjoying it. And I kind of told Travis, I was like, well, I'm going to watch this if just for context and possibly to do as a shelf pick. And because Bedazzled 2000 was so bad, we were like, you know what, let's just both watch this together. Like, let's see what we get out of it. And lo and behold, Bedazzled from 1967, which is written by and starring Peter Cook and Dudley Moore and directed by Stanley Donen, who I believe passed away, if not earlier this year, last year. This is such a incredibly clever movie.
Oh, yeah.
I would have been interested if we watched this first, because upon seeing what the remake did and kind of what it decided to take from the original, it misses so much of what the original was actually about.
With this, I think it's important to have this context in that this is spun from the minds of two people who did a sketch show together. You have Peter Cook and Dudley Moore. And so this entire movie feels like something that was born of their prior sketches.
And it was, some parts were.
Yes, indeed they were. It's also an incredibly talky film, but the whole film is about the sort of banter and rhythm back and forth between these two characters. One of the crucial things about this concept, whether you're talking about the original 1967 film or the 2000 remake, is that the devil and the protagonist, that is the central dynamic, and you cannot neglect it. It's one of the reasons why the 2000 movie's not good. Here, not only do they not neglect it, it actually flourishes, that they focus on the through line of these two main characters and sort of how they deserve one another throughout every scene of the film. Well, and it's such a success.
It becomes actually more focused on their relationship than it necessarily is with the protagonist's longing relationship with this romantic interest.
Mm.
Like that becomes a big thing in the remake, and is awful by the end, where it's like, oh, well, he asks her out, but she says, I'm not interested. I'm seeing someone else. And then he runs into his new neighbor, who's played by Frances O'Connor as well.
Same actress. Yeah.
Yes. And is just, totally nerdy and is into his nerdy stuff, and they hit it off, and it's like, that sucks. That's a crap ending. But the movie's clearly about that more than it is the relationship between the protagonist and the devil. Whereas in the 67 version, there are so many scenes of Moore and Cook. I love that the devil has a name in this one. He's George Spigot.
Mm-hmm.
Which this is all also extremely British. And then Dudley Moore's character's name is Stanley Moon. And they continue to have incredibly meaningful conversations. Their relationship changes throughout the course of the movie. The George starts taking a genuine liking to Stanley and is kind of bummed out for him when his wishes don't work. He's also way more present in both the wishes and in the in-between sections, because every time, and they do this in the remake, but it feels so passive. Every time Stanley decides to blow a raspberry, because that's the way he cancels his wishes in the original. So funny. There's so many good moments with that. He ends up being zapped to wherever the devil is. And the devil in this is tasked with constantly causing mischievous problems on Earth, which will be like making pigeons shit on people's hats.
Oh yeah. The mundanity of the devil's evil in this is one of the best running gags in it. Like, he's just doing all these like silly minor evils. In both movies, it's revealed that the devil has like this bar. And of course in the Bedazzled 2000, like it's at first appears to be like a very chic kind of like, I don't know, it's a nightclub Blade might shoot vampires in or something like that. In this one, it's this incredibly sad redecorated bar. When Dudley Moore's character asks about the decor, the devil goes, oh yeah, early Hitler, which is a fucking incredible joke. The place is revealed to be basically kind of like a Santa's workshop, like a really dinky version of Santa's workshop. Instead of building toys, it's like doing minor destruction to things people are supposed to get in the mail. So he'll take a book and like tear one page out of it.
Oh no, well, it's it's a crate of Agatha Christie novels, and he rips out the last page.
Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Stuff like he has like a bunch of records, and he pulls them out, and he like scratches them or like wipes some gunk on them and then puts them back in. And then he just has this little, pulley system thing that sends them off into the world. But another thing that they don't do in the remake that's in this is that there are incarnations of the 7 deadly sins that are like that's Santa's elves in this.
Basically, yeah. The first one we meet is Anger, and it's of course just a big angry guy in the bar, kind of like the bar's bouncer,
with a t-shirt that's a mushroom cloud that says "Make war, not love."
Yeah. I mean, it's very silly jokes, and that's one of the things that I love about British humor is it's dry, it's silly, it's clever, and often in equal measure, and that's on full display here. I love that. One of the best aspects of this movie that I think was really carried over is like there's a big popular bombshell babe in it. Raquel Welch plays Lust, and it's a funny fucking character. She really gets to flex her comedy chops in these couple scenes she gets.
You said this when we were screening. She puts on this like Dolly Parton-esque accent, and everything she says is just riddled with innuendo. Like just like
everything's a double entendre. Yeah,
yeah. She's bringing some food to Stanley in bed, and she'll just every line she somehow makes into a double entendre innuendo. She's like about the coffee. She's just like strong, black, and sweet. Oh my God. It's funny. It's sexy. Like it's legitimately sexy.
So, well, I mean, just Raquel Welch. I mean, like again, height of her power.
Yeah. Not Raquel Welch just as a pinup, as a poster. Like her acting makes it sexy and funny in equal measure. It's great.
Yeah, no, she's doing a great job.
Our main character is very different in the outset. In this one, he's a short order cook, and the girl that he's in love with is one of the waitresses, and he can't even muster up the courage to say anything to her. And the movie actually opens, I believe, with him in church praying that he'll be able to speak to her.
Yep.
And the devil pops open a little window in the church and looks through and is like, I see one.
10 minutes later, Dudley Moore's character is ready to hang himself.
Yes. He's about to hang himself. And of course, I've seen this done in other movies, but he ties the noose to a pipe, and when he jumps down, the pipe breaks and it's leaking. Yeah. It's like, I can't even kill myself.
Well, this is such a British thing. There's this really dark, sardonic edge to the humor. Mm-hmm. The sardonic nature of it really reminds me in moments of like Men in Black.
Sure.
The wit is really, really acerbic and often kind of cynical, but in a way that feels appropriate for the material.
And it never crosses over. I think much like Men in Black, Bedazzled, it has that cynicism, it has that acerbic wit, it's really biting, but there is this through line of heart in it. Like it's not a totally cruel movie, even though like there's quite a lot of cruel commentary in it. This relationship between Cook and Moore, or Stanley and George, it blossoms into a genuine friendship. I think at the end of like his third or fourth wish, when he takes George takes Stanley to sleep in his bedroom, he says something to the effect of like, no, like I'm really glad we've become friends. And Stanley says, it's like, you're the only person who's ever like bothered to talk to me.
Yeah. It would be really easy to play up a sort of homoerotic thing between these characters. They don't ever go there. Instead, it's actually incredibly laden with like friendly sincerity, because it turns out like this is what this character really needed, was a friend, like somebody to commiserate with and shoot the shit with and like be jokey with and sardonic with. Like it's worked to his benefit. Like that's why he's an improved character at the end of the movie. He's not only allowed to see the more negative aspects of himself, but he actually developed a real genuine platonic friendship with somebody. And that's totally missing from the remake.
Another thing that's missing from the remake that we talked about is stellar filmmaking.
Stanley Donen, one of the directors of Singing in the Rain. Thank you.
Yeah, this is an amazing looking movie. It's a comedy, but it's certainly lower budgeted.
Yeah.
It has that kind of sketch comedy look in certain ways, but Stanley Donen directs this like he's directing a fucking film, because this movie does not skimp on interesting and compelling setups and framing and just good cinema, like good transitioning between scenes. Certainly for the wishes. There's some great hard cuts.
Good fucking visual gags. Oh my God.
Yeah. Oh my, so many great visual gags.
And visual gags that actually make really brilliant use of the wide aspect ratio. So this is in super wide aspect ratio. I think it's wider than typical scope. So there are jokes that would have been completely lost to like a full screen version of this movie, because you'd essentially only be seeing half the frame. There's this joke where in the version of the scene where Dudley Moore is rich and his wife is sleeping with somebody else, we assume his wife is sleeping with her harp instructor, but no, it actually turns out to be Spigot, the devil character. And there's a scene where Dudley Moore walks in on Spigot taking a bath, and you can see the wife's bare breasts in a mirror on the far left side of the frame. And it's a very funny visual gag because it's the only time you see any nudity in the film at all. And to see it just, so carefully placed in the frame is like, oh wow, in the full screen version you would have completely lost that gag. There's also stuff like, the devil has these filing cabinets, and when he opens the drawers, they open out like 6 feet. And you would have lost that. You would not have seen the depth, and it would not have filled the frame in the same way. There is a similar joke in the 2000s version. It's one of my favorite moments of the 2000 version, where the devil's filing cabinet is made out of like morgue, the kind of like morgue slabs that slide in and out of the wall.
Yeah, the morgue freezers.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, no, that's fun. That there is some of that in the remake, but again, it's few and far between. But even beyond visual gags, the aspect ratio in the original allows for some really intriguing and interesting framing. And it's not stuff that's necessarily, trying to draw attention to itself. Like very early on, when we meet the devil, which in the remake happens at exactly 10 minutes on my time code.
Yeah.
But in the original, I think it's even like 7 or 6 minutes. But when George first comes to his apartment, there is a shot of Stanley, and I believe he's sitting down, and he would be looking essentially up towards the devil, and his head is just very, just curiously kind of small in the frame and being framed through, like there's like a piece of broken glass or something else in the frame, and then there's kind of like a lot of empty space to the left of the image.
Well, there's this like French door in the apartment, and some of the glass has been taken out of it. One of the things that Donen uses a lot in this movie is that he will shoot through sort of obstructions. He will shoot through fences. He will shoot through glass. He will smear stuff on the lens. They will filter the lens quite heavily sometimes. That's just a common thing that Donen does as a cinematographic technique here. And sometimes I understand why they do that. I think they may have had to do that in that apartment set just because the apartment set was so fucking small and the frame was going to be really, really wide.
Mm-hmm.
So that was maybe one of the few ways they had to stage that.
Well, and also just, to make staging such a small place interesting in any way.
Sure.
It's like if you just keep doing the same basic over the shoulder shot, reverse shot, like, this movie's a really good piece of filmmaking.
Oh, yeah. Really killer setups in this flick.
Well, it just shows, you don't have to be these, epics, or you don't have to be some kind of, you can make a good looking, interesting piece of cinema, of cinematography with a movie that is, today would probably just be some, Jason Sudeikis and Owen Wilson comedy thing, or of, those, that type of movie where it's like the filmmaking is not important here. Nobody's going to care. Like, let's just do the gags and make things funny. But Donen makes this look like a legit movie and makes the movie look better because, yeah, it's a cheaper looking movie at times, but that's part of its charm, and he bolsters it.
Yeah. Bedazzled the 2000 remake has a sequence where they go to actual hell and Elizabeth Hurley's character turns into a giant devil monster sculpted by Studio 80i. And it's a big devil suit called Biggest Devil in the credits. It was put on by Tom Woodruff, who played the alien in Alien Resurrection and Alien 3. And
he was Aliens and Aliens.
AVPR, I think he was. And then AVP, I think he also had the alien suit on. He's just one of the classic alien actors now. And he was a biggest devil for Bedazzled. So its money went to stuff like that. For Bedazzled 1967, obviously it's a lower budget affair. And so the focus is really more on just like, how do scenes play out as dialogue? Because, it's so dialogue heavy.
Yeah, it's a talky British comedy.
And a lot of it is philosophy. It's people actually talking about philosophies of life and, literal philosophers. It's not played off as just a gag like it is with, Brendan Fraser's sort of effete gay version that we see in one sequence. This is the entire movie now where it's actually talking about.
No, there's great theological discussions between Stanley and George about God and like
it starts feeling like the Matrix sequels in some points where you're just like these characters are having philosophical discussions and there are like theological standing characters like, okay, this character is clearly meant to play like this God or is representing this mythological character in this scene. Like it really does feel like that in quite a few scenes.
As somebody who was raised with some Christian certainly background, it's really interesting to me to see that plucked in here. It remains funny, but it's also intellectually stimulating. Their conversations grow, and eventually we learn more about what's actually going on between God and the devil, what their relationship is. And that's something that's totally missing in the remake, is that the devil in the remake doesn't really have an arc.
Right. She's got nothing going on other than just being the devil. Here, Peter Cook's character, George Spigot, Satan himself, actually wants something. He wants to win God's favor back. He talks about being a narcissist where it's like all the adoration was focused on God and that wasn't okay with me and that's why I got cast out. But he wants the approval and the validation that only God could give him, and so he wants to go back. So we actually do see him go back up to heaven.
The deal was that he and God made a bet, essentially, that whoever got 100 billion souls first would win, and if Lucifer wins, then he got to come back up into heaven. And Lucifer was like, I made this bet. No, it's like, I'm going to win this because way more people are going to go to hell than go to heaven.
Sure.
By the end of the movie, he has done this. Like, he's won, and when Stanley realizes that he has no more wishes left and that his soul is going to be collected, George just waves it, and he's like, you know what? I really do like you. We've really become friends. I've got my 100 billion and plus some more. I don't need one more soul. You can take your contract and burn it up. We're done. And it was like, whereas in the remake, the deal is that out of nowhere, set up not at all in any way, Brendan Fraser just makes a wish for, I think her name's Allison in the remake.
Yeah. He just wants her to be happy instead of wishing for himself to be happy, which, I appreciate the sentiment. It's not a bad idea.
No, but it's a total, it just feels so out of left field, because after that, Elizabeth Hurley shows up and is like, nobody reads the contract. If you make one selfish wish, then the whole bargain's, donezo.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, but like, he wasn't learning that over the movie. He wasn't learning that it should be about Allison's happiness.
Right.
Like, that wasn't ever established. Whereas this whole issue in the original is very slowly built up in the between scenes every time one of Stanley's wishes goes kaput.
Exactly.
Like, they slowly build this up so that at the end it pays off and you're like, oh, cool. And then we leave Stanley and we're just following Satan, like going back up into heaven in this little elevator, and St. Peter's a gardener and all this. And it turns out that no, you can't get into heaven because you didn't do a truly good deed. The good deed that you did for Stanley letting his contract go was because it made you feel good. It wasn't a truly altruistic act. So then George is like, hold on, I'll go back and I'll get his contract back, and then I'll give it to him for the right reasons. Like, which is so great. But of course, by the time he gets back, Stanley has burned his contract. Everything's been, set back to the beginning. He's a short order cook again. And the entire arc for Stanley is just that he gets up the courage to ask, I can't remember her name now. It starts Margaret.
Yeah.
He asks Margaret, just like, would you like to go to dinner tonight? And she says, I can't tonight, maybe tomorrow night. And that's it. Who knows what will happen, but he does not magically get some version of the girl. It's just hey, he learned to be a little bit more confident about himself.
Yeah.
About who he is. Because that was his whole, because the last wish, The spin is that he gets turned into a nun. And George says, like, nobody reads the contract. Whatever happens in your last wish, that's what you're stuck with. And then Stanley has this big thing about, like, I'd give anything to be me again. And at the beginning of the movie, he wanted to be anybody but himself. And so it's like, hey, arcs, learning things. Where was this in the remake?
It's really night and day. I mean, it's bedazzled and disappointed.
Great one. I mean, that was you're
I've been sitting on that for 37 minutes and 22, 23, 24 seconds.
The movie, the remake deserved that joke.
There isn't a single joke as good as that in the American remake. Come on, let's be honest here. I really hate to take such a hearty dump on a movie, but like this was not good, folks.
In a way, Junior is better than Bedazzled because it's so offensive.
It's more remarkable, frankly.
Yes, exactly. Like Bedazzled is like the remake is a disposable movie. Like and that sucks. Like I feel that way too when you say it's like I don't want to dump that hard, but it really is. And then you see the remake and you're like, wow, this is a legit, really good movie. And as an end to Satan Timber, I'm very glad that we decided to watch the remake because Bedazzled would have been an absolute bummer to end on because this has actually been a really good month.
Yeah, you and I have had a really, really great month, and we chose some really fun interpretations of Satan as a character. You know, we've had our share of Faustian deals. Mm-hmm. This is something that I think we may have to revisit, where we can find movies where the devil's in it, but there's no Faustian deal.
That is, I mean, we didn't think about that when we made the list, but as we were watching, it's like, yeah, every one of these movies is a Faustian deal movie. The devil is part of some kind of bargain that is being made.
Yeah, transactional devil.
Yes, so it would be interesting to see a devil where that's, not going on, where the devil is a very different kind of character. But something, whenever we do these theme months, I try to do a wrap up what we learned kind of thing. One thing I definitely learned is if you're going to have the devil in your movie and it's going to be a transaction, a deal, the devil must give you a business card.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. Ideally, it'll happen like it does in Devil and Daniel Webster, a.k.a. All That Money Can Buy. But,
Sure.
I like that that's the only movie I've ever seen that in. The flash paper business card. That's one thing that makes that movie stand the fuck out. We had a comment, I forget who it was from, but they were like, after I actually think it was Bacon Lettuce Potato. They're like, after you described that scene to me, like I was sold. And I was like, fuck yeah, man. That really drew me into the movie seeing that. So,
well, that was because yes, in almost every movie we did this month, the devil shows someone their business card. That's the only one where nobody took it. Which is another fun twist. And then of course the flash paper was just like, so amazing. But so I definitely learned that the devil has to give you a business card. And for the most part, I would say, maybe with the exception of our first two movies, I think a lot of people do want to look at the devil in some more, if not sympathetic ways, at least like writers want to like the devil.
It's a fascinating character to write.
Yeah, of course. I mean, because in Devil and Daniel Webster, I wouldn't say that there's ever a sympathetic edge to Scratch.
No.
But he's extremely entertaining and likable and makes great points. Like, his whole entire, when the first Indian was killed, I was here.
Mm-hmm.
All this kind of stuff. It's like the devil is quite compelling. With Petey Wheatstraw, the devil was like a pretty, I loved that when he's like, he was just a guy. He was just a guy, like a very personable, regular dude.
A short, dapper man with an ugly daughter.
Yeah, who just happened to be the devil. And obviously in Bedazzled, because the devil is, while the devil is an antagonist in both versions, they also, certainly much more in the remake, but I think overall they're meant to be a very likable character who openly says, like, I like you, Stanley, or whatever Brendan Fraser's name was in the remake. Like, I genuinely do like you. I'm not trying to trick you. It's just, that's my nature. That's what happens with these wishes. Side note, another great thing that's in the original is that the devil has a magic word for his wishes, which is Julie Andrews.
Yeah, which is incredibly funny.
But yeah, I would not be averse to revisiting another Satan month where the obstruction that we put in ourselves is no Faustian deals. The devil cannot be involved in those kinds of direct bargains with certain characters.
We'll call it Satan Sandwich Hold the Faust.
There you go. But now I think it is time to head over to the shelf, where we pick a movie that might act as a good pairing or substitute in certain cases. And we encourage you, loyal listener, to go to GenreVision.com and comment on the post for this episode with your own shelf pick, because the shelf is a collaborative thing that we do here. So if you leave a shelf pick, we will feature it on next week's episode. Travis, what are you going to pull off the shelf for Bedazzled and Bedazzled?
Well, in the spirit of these sort of cosmic soul-searching sketch comedy, you know, this search of like, you know, what does it all mean and who is God and who's the devil, I couldn't help but think of Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. Certainly not their most beloved film, but probably my favorite of theirs.
I think it's mine too.
Deeply ugly and sardonic, but it has some stuff in it that's so fucking unforgettable. There are some high points in The Meaning of Life that I'll always champion over pretty much anything else they've done, including some movies that are I probably like better. Like we both agree that like Life of Brian's likely a better movie.
Well, I mean, because it's like a more cohesive story. Meaning of Life is, for all intents and purposes, a sketch movie. But you know, Meaning of Life has the Crimson Permanent Assurance.
Oh yeah, well
it's great.
It's a fantastic short, but this is their most aggressively surreal and antagonistic film in their filmography. And, you know, Python's humor was often aggressively surreal and antagonistic. And this takes it to such an extreme. Like even the movie's lowest points are honestly like so shocking that they're unforgivable. They're unforgettable, rather.
Well, I mean, as a thematic statement, it's so fun because Life of Brian famously and amazingly ends with all these crucified people singing "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life."
Yeah.
Which like that is a great summation of, wow, Monty Python's really dark, but they are really bright and silly at the same time. And Meaning of Life, while that does end up happening, like the big giant heaven dance number at the end is phenomenal.
It's Christmas in heaven. Yeah.
with the angels with their boobs out.
Yeah.
It's so funny. But as a statement, as a thesis movie of like, we're going to talk about the meaning of life, Python's commentary is like, life is awful. Like, life's really, really bad.
It takes you on a tour of some really disgusting stuff. I mean, I love Eric Idle's big tour of the galaxy.
Oh yeah, Galaxy song's amazing.
Yep. That character's incredible.
Yep, that Whenever Life Gets You Down, Mrs. Brown.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the entire the sequence where Michael Palin's is a Catholic and he's going to sell his kids for medical experiments.
Oh, yeah, every sperm is sacred.
Every sperm is sacred. But with that song happens, they cut back. He's like, so you see, I have to sell you all for medical experiments.
Yeah.
It's so great.
And like one of their low points that I love, it's like one of their most lowest brow moments is the whole Mr. Creosote sketch. With Gary Jones in the giant fat suit.
Great body horror. That's a body horror highlight.
Yeah. Like the score is so great in that scene. And John Cleese is just a monster too.
It's wafer thin.
Yeah, it's only a wafer thin. It contains one of my favorite exchanges in a Monty Python movie. Is how are we feeling tonight, sir? Better, sir. Yeah, better get a bucket. I'm gonna throw up.
No, yeah. I mean, it is. I do agree. It's got to be their least liked feature film.
It's easy to see why. It's just fucking mean.
Yeah, it's their darkest movie. It's their weirdest movie, like their most surreal by far.
Yeah. Oh, I wonder where that fish has gone. All that shit.
Yes. Yeah. Spot the fish. It is the one that I think about more often as I get older. The songs in it are great. I mean, Holy Grail and Life of Brian are untouchable classics, but I think that's also part of the reason why I like Meaning of Life so much, is like, this is the one that nobody seems to really go to bat for. And I know why. Like, it's really oppressive at times. But it is it's so funny. Like, when it's funny, it might have some of the funniest moments in any Python movie.
For sure. All right. What are you pulling off the shelf this week, sir?
Well, I wanted to redeem Brendan Fraser somewhat, but I didn't want to just say, go watch The Mummy, which everybody should do because it's great.
Yeah.
But I am not super privy to that early period of Brendan Fraser when he was primarily a comedy persona. You know, like Encino Man was a big breakout for him.
Didn't he do Airheads as well?
Airheads is my shelf pick, yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Airheads is a movie I have not revisited since I was a kid, but I remember liking it, and I remember a couple of bits from it. It's directed by Michael Lehman, whose feature film debut was Heathers. So I even though the characters are very stupid, also extremely early Adam Sandler feature role.
Sure.
I mean, that trio alone, it's like it's Brendan Fraser, Adam Sandler, and Steve Buscemi. Like in 1994, there's got to be something here.
One would hope. Oof.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I'm saying this as a shelf pick for the Bedazzled remake because I have the same relationship to it as I did the Bedazzled remake, where it's like I saw it probably once. It used to be on TV all the time, and I catch bits and pieces of it. But I sat and watched that movie one time when I was a kid, and I remember enjoying it.
This has a great cast. Michael McKean's in it. Reggie Cathy is in it. Ernie Hudson's in this thing. It can't be all bad.
It can't be. I would hope not. And I know it has a small but loyal cult following, which Bedazzled certainly does not and will never deserve and will never get.
Jesus.
So it's not. I'm just telling you. I'm just saying.
He's already dead, Drew.
But Airheads is a movie that I was thinking about with it's like, maybe that's something I should go because I'm all here for the Brendan Fraser Renaissance, and I'm all here for reevaluating some of the stuff he's done in the past and seeing stuff that I've not seen. We were talking about potentially doing Blast from the Past on the show eventually, a movie I've not seen. And that's something that interests me. It's like, there's this period, like everybody loves Brendan Fraser because he was amazing in The Mummy, but there's this other period that doesn't get as much focus. And sometimes in the case of the Bedazzled remake, there's a very good reason for that. But maybe there's some other stuff there. And I think Airheads probably has the best chance of there being something there. So I don't know. I'm recommending it as essentially a movie I don't know because the big gag I remember from it is that their band is called the Lone Rangers. And everybody keeps making it. It's like, how can you be the Lone Rangers? You're lone. And they just don't get it. They're a bunch of airheads. So maybe one day I'll revisit that and report back and see how it is. But that's going to be my shelf pick for this week. And now we move on to the listener shelf picks for last week's episode on Petey Wheatstraw, the Devil's Son-in-Law. Mr. Milksteak went with I'm Gonna Get You, Sucka, and Tenacious D in the Pick of Destiny. Hail Satan. Eric Fuchs went with The Avenging Disco Godfather, which I also recommend. I forgot it was called The Avenging Disco Godfather. I've always referred to it as Disco Godfather. The last of the great Rudy Ray Moore movies. Eric Johnson went with Black Dynamite, as you mentioned. Also, the Twilight Zone episode Printer's Devil with Burgess Meredith. Really good episode. And also the episode And Now the News from the Friday the 13th series, which I have never seen an episode from. I watched the documentary and have seen stuff about it, but I've never seen a full episode from that. And I think like David Cronenberg did an episode, and Adam Agoyan directed an episode. It was like big, like up and coming Canadian talent thing up there.
I'll have to watch some of it someday. Again, I've never seen it, just like you. So
yeah, one
day.
Stephen Esbella went with the ending of the Thriller video because of the ending of Petey Wheatstraw, in which the devil turns around and I gotcha.
Yep, great final shot.
And DT Grizzler went with the Chevy Chase movie Modern Problems, which I have no read on whatsoever.
I don't think I've ever heard of it.
I mean, the name sounds familiar, but that's it. Like, I have nothing else to go on. But they certainly left their reasons for it. And now I'm going to have to look this up and at least know what the poster looks like. So thank you, everybody, for these shelf picks. They have become such a wonderful cornerstone of GenreVision here. And we look forward to next week's on Bedazzled and Bedazzled. Now, we do have to do some quick calls to action, but stick around because Travis and I are going to give our official GenreVision sealed review of the new Candyman movie. Yes, it's happening. So stick around real quickly, though. If you love what we do here on the show, we would absolutely love it if you went to the Apple Podcast Store and rated and reviewed the show. These things are incredibly important. It's the reason why I'm sure if you are regular listeners, you hate hearing us talk about them every week, but that's why we do it every week, because they really do matter. If you leave a written review, we will feature it here on the show, even if it's a bad one. We've done that before, but these things really help the show out, and we're just going to have to keep asking for them until we get more. So.
Yep, indeed. Hey, Drew, I got a question for you. This month is September. What's next month?
October.
And what are we doing for October?
It's a celebration of horror. We have tons of fun stuff coming up.
And then what happens after that?
After October, normally November happens.
Yeah, that's true. We don't know what's going to happen this year. It's anybody's guess. But if you want to figure out what happens in November, a great place to figure that out is to go to patreon.com/GenreVision, and you can hear today's pre-show recording where Drew and I try to figure out what the hell we're going to do for November. That is one of my favorite things that we do as part of our pre-shows is actually figure out what we do for our theme months and like how we schedule things out. It's a great look behind the scenes of the show.
Fun brainstorming going on at patreon.com/GenreVision, and you get the first inside sneak peek at what's up ahead. So if that's something that interests you and you would like even more bonus content, including weekly pre-shows, extended monthly currently consumings, additional bonus stuff for our other podcasts, you can go to patreon.com/GenreVision and become a premium subscriber for just $5 a month. Gets you all that access. And in all honesty, it keeps the show alive. We're not joking. It is keeping the show going. And speaking of Patreon, we have wonderful news. A new patron has joined us over at patreon.com/GenreVision. This is Lee, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly, Lhii. Lee, you are awesome. You are keeping the show alive, and you now have access to all the great bonus content we make for our Patreon members at patreon.com/GenreVision. Thank you, Lee, and thank you to all of our patrons. Now, let's do some currently consuming.
Num 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 num.
We hear you're looking for Candyman, bitch.
We finally went looking Candyman because it came out. I meant to check exactly how long it went from theaters to VOD, and
we'll never know.
I mean, yeah, we could look it up, but I'm too lazy. I'm tired. Instead, what we'll say is that this past weekend we rented it. It was $20 to watch it in 4K. Looked great.
Yeah.
4K looked good.
It's a very clean looking movie. It's got a very modern digital cleanliness to it that the movie really embraces. It's all about contemporary, hip art and gentrification of a once grungy neighborhood. And
well, what's interesting is obviously there's going to be repellent feelings about this because it's like, it's unabashedly political, and it's like you said, it's not there's hardly subtext.
No,
like it is straightforward with what it's saying in such clear-cut ways that it's impossible to ignore it as a fabric of the story. And in all honesty, it's that attitude is one of the things that makes the movie better.
Well, and it's one thing to be like out, with political messaging in your movies, and it's really easy to be clumsy with it. It's actually really easy to fuck that up, and it makes certain movies like Black Christmas 2019. I mean, come on.
There was that Antebellum movie.
Sure.
The Hunt, like all this stuff. They've all tried to do this.
So a lot of this takes deft writing and a really solid vision. And thankfully, Candyman 2021's got that. Like, it's got it.
Yeah, it's undeniably a vision. Like it feels like a very crystallized, deliberate take. And we say this, certainly privately, but it bears repeating on the show. Like, the older I get, the more I want these kinds of movies to have takes. Like,
sure.
Whether they're good or bad, I want it to be like, this is a strong, hard, unapologetic take on your idea. And Candyman, we will not get into spoilers, but by the end of this movie, I was like, that's the idea. That's the take that you walked in with and are like, let's do this.
Yeah.
And
it should be said, like, pre-pandemic, having a new politicized take on a film could help get your movie made, particularly if it was like a Universal sort of like Blumhouse thing, if it was associated with Jordan Peele as well. Like, if you had a political take on a property, you could go. That movie could make money. I mean, Invisible Man, it's all there. Then during this pandemic, I don't know, and certainly after this state that we're in, if that ever happens, I don't know if that will be the case going forward, but this is a movie from another time, and thankfully it's still searingly relevant and just gorgeously directed.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I stayed away from most of the conversation around this movie, and what's interesting is that I've seen a lot of this is a very thin anecdotal analysis, but it seems that it has been extremely praised by a lot of white critics and more so criticized by black critics. And that actually makes it more intriguing to me.
Sure. Well, and I've been curious as to what Black critics are saying, what Black people and Black voices have to say about this new Candyman. It is indeed a very didactic take, and they had to consider the audience. The new sort of thematic through line for this twist is like, well, okay, if Candyman was originally a story about Black tragedy, violence against Black people, and the disenfranchisement of Black people wholesale, like, okay, whose story is that to tell? And the firm answer that this movie gives is, well, it's not really Clive Barker's story to tell. This needs to be a story told by Black voices, and that's a sentiment I agree with. The story told to whom is another important question. To whom?
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm not going to get too into the weeds about that, because the original Candyman is absolutely one of my favorite horror movies, and I've written about it, arguing that it might be the best horror movie of the 90s. But I've also been able to look at it from, non-white perspectives, specifically Black perspectives, and gain a new perspective on a movie I still love, but can still, think critically about. And
of course, yeah.
And this new one is very clear in its intention across the board and what it wants to do. This isn't a spoiler, but I think one of its most interesting wrinkles is the idea to say, well, there's not one Candyman.
Right.
Like, the idea is that, yes, there was an original, Daniel Robital, who's the one that we know of. But the idea is that in the universe of this movie, Candyman has changed and been applied to different characters over the years that have been a part of this, these projects, this area.
Right.
And
it's a bigger urban myth than just Daniel Robitaille.
Yeah. And to the point where it acknowledges, Helen, Virginia Madsen's character, is like, she's a Candyman.
Kind of, yeah.
And all of this is done with really cool, extremely formalist puppet animation sequences, which were a big part of the marketing. And I thought for sure, I was like, this is for the marketing. This isn't going to be in the movie.
It's all in the movie. It's great.
It's all there and more. There was more of it. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. And again, it's a movie about storytelling, which is always fascinating and like enjoyably navel-gazy to me. But with this particular idea of like, well, you're talking about an urban myth, an urban legend, an urban story. So it has to be about storytelling. The original one certainly has seeds of that. Like, how do urban myths start? What do they mean to the, community that they spring from? And this one becomes more about like, well, who is doing the telling?
Right.
Like, and like you said, who is it being told to, and what themes and meanings are being pulled from that because of it. It's a wonderfully rich and thematic movie. But again, you don't have to dig deep at all for what it's trying to say.
No. It's very open about this whole idea of reclaiming the stories to tell as reclaiming stories to tell as one's own. And that is incredibly important. And again, it could have been done much more clumsily than it is here. I think there are plenty of arguments that it is done clumsily here, and it is voiced to the wrong audience. And I think those takes are just as valid as mine, if not, more valid. So I'm fine with multiple takes on all that. It's the kind of film that is rich enough to merit discussion. It's not an easy film to dismiss because there's a lot going on.
No, I mean, it demands discussion in the way that it presents itself.
Oh, it's not the very topics at hand demand discussion. I mean, damn.
Yeah, but I mean, like, so it's a wonderfully inciting movie. It's made to be inciting. Like that's really, and that's exciting. Like, because there's a lot of stuff that has to, like you said, try and tiptoe around it, or it does it and it's so, like, that Antebellum movie's so bad at this. It's a great comparison where it's like, you're both being very obvious with what you're talking about, but one of you is doing it in an artful way and with a lot of understanding, and the other one's just like, see? And Candyman, like, we both, and Danny as well, hi Danny, were very stoked on the ending, which alone could merit tons of discussion. But I also totally see it as something as like, this changes things so much that that people don't agree with it.
Yeah, well,
no matter what their background may be.
It's so bold, and I think for me, the by the time the movie ended, I was like ready to stand up and shout, like put my fists in the air.
Oh yeah, I'm on board with what they do 100%. Like I loved it, but I'm also able to like look at it from a different perspective and see like I actually see how this is. I don't want to talk too much because I'll end up giving something away, but I see that it's an ending that in some ways changes the character so much that it may as well not be that character to some people.
I feel like it takes the first movie seriously enough to not invalidate that, but
no, not at all. But
I think people who really love the first movie and are expecting a sort of return to form will be disappointed because this movie does not give a fuck what fans think or want. Even
tonally, like you were saying when we watched it, it's like there's nothing gothic about this like there is in the original.
Yes.
While it certainly has scary moments, it is a horror movie, it changes in, like you said, very bold ways as it goes on. And by the ending, it's and this means a lot coming from me who calls everything a horror movie. By the ending, it's not a horror movie.
I mean, I'll fundamentally disagree with you there, but I see why you're saying that.
Well, I can't elaborate without being spoilery, but like, the ending of the movie has shifted into being like, no. This is something very different, and that's the bolt. That's again like that's the take. You walk in and slam, walk into the pitching room and slam down on the table and like this is fucking bold. And, and I love that so much. I might love that boldness more than the actual result of what happens. It's like that's just that's such a huge idea that I never ever could have thought of. So I mean, I'm definitely it's definitely gonna be one of my top 10 of the year.
Oh, no question for me. I mean, hey, a couple other things in this movie's corner. It's fucking short, and it's got a killer edit on it, man. Woof.
Also, great score.
And it never feels insubstantial either. Like the characters are, I think, way more richly explored in this movie than they would be in movies of similar lengths and of like similar tone. I gotta hand it to it. I had a really it's hard to say I had like a good time with it, but damn, like I found this super, super compelling, and it will certainly be in my top 10 of the year.
For sure. So we will be going into October feeling good about horror because it's a big celebratory month for Halloween. It's just happy Halloween. And while we're not doing a bunch of Halloween themed movies, we're just having kind of a big party, fun horror stuff. And we're going to kick that off with an 80s versus between Fright Night 1985 and Hello Mary Lou Prom Night 2 from 1987. I'm very stoked to pit those two up against each other. And I think this will be the first time you've seen Prom Night 2, right?
That is correct.
Yeah, so it's always fun for us to see something we've never seen before. And you can go to GenreVision.com and check out the schedule page to see everything we've got lined up for October. It's a really, really, really fun lineup. I'm super stoked for next month, and we hope you will be too. As always, we want to thank you so much for listening. I'm Drew Deitch.
I'm Travis Newton.
And we'll see you next week.
Right here on GenreVision.